Dare we open Pandora's mystic box?
To every generation, a slayer is born, except this time there were 6.
This is the dimension of imagination. You are entering the mystic zone.
Do you ladies see that aura? Something wonderful this way comes.
Welcome to the Mystic Order podcast. We are the Mystic Order of East Alabama fiction writers, 6 women of an age seeking the sublime in the ordinary. I am Katie, the Oracle Mystic, or the Mystic Oracle.
And I'm Margie, the Illuminator Mystic.
And I'm Joanne, the Mystic Defender.
I'm Marion, the Dog Whisperer Mystic.
I'm the Queen.
And I'm Mary, the Nebulous Mystic. We have a guest.
We do have a guest. We have a very special guest, June Wilcox, who is the owner of Auburn's newest, most coolest place ever.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking as this started, as we were warming up for this, about how Auburn's such a great place and all it needed was a bookstore. And now we have one, thanks to June, who is co-owner, I guess, of the Auburn Oil Company Booksellers in downtown Auburn. Welcome, June.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with y'all.
We're here to grill you about bookstores. Not really.
This should be fun.
Conversation about bookstores, and we're really looking forward to finding out more about it. But maybe we could start with telling us how you got to be a bookseller.
Completely by accident. I guess y'all are all readers, right? I mean, so I have a lifelong passion for reading, but none of it involved selling books. So this has been a real learning experience for me. I happened to have some friends who had a good idea in Greenville, and we started a bookstore up there 5 years ago. And I have a love of Auburn. My husband is from here. We spent a lot of time in this community, and we really felt like this would be a wonderful place to have a bookstore. And so the one up in Greenville was a great success and is still a big success. And so we decided to give it a try here, and it's been amazing.
But why the name?
Why Auburn Oil Company Booksellers?
Right.
My father-in-law back in the day had gas stations here in Auburn. And the name of his company was Auburn Oil Company. And the gas stations were branded Phillips 66, but his company was Auburn Oil Company. And we really felt like that was, first of all, the spirit of Murphy Armour, my father-in-law, was just a wonderful, generous, community-minded man. But also, gas stations were one of the original storytelling places in the South, right?
Nice.
I mean, it's where people gathered. It's where people communed and told stories and got to know each other. And we really wanted that to be part of the spirit that we brought to this community. And so it's one of those, guiding lights for us and who we are and who we were.
You kept saying Greenville and up there, but Greenville, Alabama is down there.
Right.
Greenville?
Sorry, Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's close to home. I was raised in Spartanburg.
You were?
Yes.
Oh, wow. There's a great bookstore there, too, if you know Hub City Books up in Spartanburg.
So my world is as big as a marble, and I just always am running into people that lived where I lived, or we passed in the evening one night, I'm sure.
Really cool.
I just want to mention very quickly that if our listeners hear great noises in the background, like latte machines going on and stuff, we are actually in Auburn Oil Booksellers Auburn Oil Company Booksellers doing this podcast. So we've got ambient sound all around us.
Mm-hmm.
So listen in and you can hear what it sounds like to be in a bookstore.
And this is a remarkable bookstore, so if I lose what I'm saying, it's because I am just overwhelmed by all the wonderful books.
Or you're just being Joanne.
I am being Joanne. ADD child. And look, another pretty.
Sparkle shiny. Did any of you have, growing up, a bookstore, the bookstores that you remember as children? Were there ones that made a good impact on your lives?
The bookstore in Auburn was Burton's Bookstore.
Okay.
It was around the corner from here. And I went there often because I collected stamps, and that was one of the things they sold. I don't remember reading a book till college. And then I started reading books.
We haven't thought about doing stamps before.
Eufaula had Schaub's bookstore that I absolutely loved. It was a bookstore magazine rack, and it sold 16 magazines when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And I had to be there I didn't live in Eufaula. I lived 15 miles from Eufaula, but I would go to Schaub's, and he also sold wedding gifts. So you could buy pretty things to give somebody for a wedding gift.
In a magazine.
And a magazine. And when he bought an old house in Eufaula, and when he was renovating it, he found a lot of antique small frames with authors' prints, lithographs of authors in them, and he saved them all for me. I was about 14 at the time, and they still hang in my house.
Wow, that's really
because
cool.
He just thought it was nice that somebody my age loved books so much.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that was
that's
my
really
first,
special.
That was my first bookstore.
Mhm.
Was Schaub's.
I'm from Atlanta, and the bookstore that I remember most was Oxford Books in Atlanta.
Okay.
And they just had a fantastic art book collection, and they had coffee there, and you could go there anytime, hear authors, and it was a huge children's book section too. When my children were young, it was a great place to go
Oh, right.
and spend time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really thought about this last night because I was raised surrounded by books, tripping over books, but not from bookstores. I don't have any memories of hanging out in bookstores when I was little. We hung out in Toomer's Corner and read the magazines on the rack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did just about live at the library. My parents would drop me off and leave me at the library. I can remember every smell, every sound, every turning of the page, sitting on the floor of the library reading those children's books. I had a great memory of being able to buy books when we would get the little sheets that would come home from school, Scholastic or Tab or whatever. And my parents, who never let me get extra stuff ever, they would let me get as many books as I wanted. And they gave me their big orange adding machine that plugged in and said, just, okay, order the books that you want. And they would write a check. So I would get, armloads of books from those little book clubs at school.
Sure.
But, I don't remember being in the actual bookstores when I was little.
I had the same experience because I guess there was so many of us, but every place we lived, I would live in the library. And even at school, I worked in the library. I mean, I can remember being in a library at 10.
People always exposed themselves in libraries, in my experience. So my mother took me to the bookstore and parked in front and watched through the window.
You mean they expose their good sense to go to the
No.
library?
No, they found
is not what
they
you meant.
got behind some
I think
racks.
that happened at the Auburn
Many
Auburn
times.
University Library as well.
Yes, it did. I'm
Well-
a magnet for it.
Well, I don't want to go to a higher ground here. However, what I was going to say before Marion took us, down that rabbit hole, if you will, is I was brought up in a house with a library because my grandfather was the first librarian for API. And not everybody thinks it's Mary, whatever her name is, Martin. But no, Mary Martin worked for my grandfather, and then when he went back to the English department, she took over as librarian. But we literally had an entire library in our house, and it fell to me to dust the entire library in my house. And honestly, I don't remember reading a single book from that library.
I was going to laugh. I have read books from that library because your mom used to come and visit at the courthouse, and she would bring me some of those books.
I want them back.
I returned them to you, Miss Gale. But yeah, they were some wonderful books, and like I said, we have always had lots of books in the house. My parents kept all of their college reading, and to get away from the summer, I would go to the library and just start at one end of a shelf and work my way through it. It was just
Well, as I look
wonderful.
around this bookstore, my very favorite shelves, and I know space is important in a bookstore because you got to make money.
It is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I look around, my favorite part is the staff picks.
Mhm.
And I want you to tell me about who picks them, how did you pick them, not the books, the staff to pick the books,
Mhm.
and about that section.
Okay. The who picks them is actually the staff. those are like legitimately the books that they love. We had the luxury of so many people who wanted to work in a bookstore, which is a really cool thing. There's just a lot of people who get what an independent bookstore can mean to a community. And we had so many people. We had literally over 100 people before we opened our doors send us applications. So we had the most amazing group to choose from. And the people that work here are phenomenal. I'm inspired by every single one of them. And we looked to people who really appreciated different genres. So, so that we had a good mix of people represented and who could really represent what was in the community. And so what you see on those shelves, I mean, it's a little bit of everything is in the staff pick section. So a lot of people find somebody that they really identify with and will read through their shelf, right? So we try to turn it over pretty frequently so that people will find something new every time they're there.
That's a joy that I have found, because you do get your own style, I guess, or your own genre that you enjoy reading. As my children have gotten older, they have gone off into science and science fiction and fantasy, and have offered books for Mama to read, and I just have loved doing that as well, just going off in something totally different that I would never have picked up on my own.
What do you lean to on your own?
Oh, probably, everything.
Comic books.
Comic books.
Pornography. Pornography.
Oh, no, not usually. Well, maybe.
Well, you write pornography, Miss Joanne.
No, that was your fault, Gail, because you said to write something dirty. Mary went to
roaches.
Roaches. I went another direction.
Bursting breeches. The preacher, no less.
It's all a matter. He was a bishop. It's all a matter of where your imagination takes you. That's what's so wonderful about a book. I know. Poor June's thinking, I've just met these women, and oh my God.
So what about you, June? What if you got a certain genre that you
genre?
adore, or that first brought you into books?
Oh, I think we all get addicted to books at different, whatever appeals to us at that stage of life, right? I mean, over time, I fell in love with children's books, and I still love children's books. I kind of skipped the middle grade genre that I don't have enough experience with. But today, literary fiction is kind of predictable, really. That, and I also do enjoy crime. I like a good thriller.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd encourage you to give that middle school, middle
Yeah,
age.
do you have experience with that?
Yes.
What do
I
you
taught
love in
middle
that?
school, and so I read everything they read. And I
What
love
are some of your favorites?
Well, if you are wanting to delve in, start with the Newbery Award winners.
Yeah.
I was in a classroom the other day, and I found myself lingering, and I was just walking out the door, and I heard a young man say, "Have any of y'all ever read The K?" But I just came running back in the classroom, and we had to talk for about 10 minutes about The K, and then we talked about The House of Dies Dreer, and just, start with the Newbery books.
Yeah.
And they are.
There's some
they're
great stuff
so
there. I
good,
just haven't
and
read enough of it.
Have you read Bud Not Buddy?
Yes.
Oh my
I
gosh,
have read that. That's
I read
beautiful.
it like
Mhm.
every year.
Yeah.
And recently I've decided that I would go back and try to reread some of my very, very favorite books. So I've gone back to read the Marguerite Henry books, Misty of Chincoteague and Stormy and Bridie of the Grand Canyon. And I really look forward to the Walter Farley books, the Black Stallion series.
Oh, I did love those.
This has been several years ago, but I was at a writers' conference, and a couple of ladies that I know were also there, and I went to all the young adult author talks, and their writing abilities and their talks about writing were wonderful.
And they are hitting some deep topics.
Oh, yes.
I mean, they're really wrestling with some things that are so important. And I think the crossover between the young adult and the adult market is really relevant right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have some great local YA writers. You feel like Rachel Hawkins and Ash Parsons, and there's some great talent in this community.
My favorite young adult book is called Codename Verity. Anybody read it? Well,
No.
I want you to. Okay. It's marvelous. Well, when I was looking at the staff picks, I came yesterday and cased the place. I hardly come uptown. I hardly shop because I work. I work where I sell things myself, so I don't do a lot of shopping, but I've been meaning to come up here, and I thought, perfect. So I came and cased the place, and I just love the space. It makes me want to buy every book on the shelf. When I was looking at staff picks and thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I thought, well, now, if I was on the staff, what would I pick? And I want y'all to think about, what book would you put up there with your name as a pick? And I picked out 10. I know you would pick Mink River.
Immediately.
But I'm going to tell you my 10 while y'all think. Burl Markham's West with the Night. Louise Erdrich's The Master Butcher Singing Club. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, one of my favorite all-time books. The Whistling Season by Doig. The Poisonwood Bible, amazing book. The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon. And then one of my most favorite hilarious books is called Things My Girlfriend and I Have Argued About. Bird by Bird. I bet that's y'all's favorite too. And The Cat's Table. And last, The Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. So what are you guys' staff's picks?
While y'all are thinking, I just pulled up Goodreads, which is an app I could not live without because now I can see all the books I've read in the last 5 years. And just a quick browse shows me the book Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight by Alexandra Fuller. And if you haven't read it, I can't recommend it highly enough.
I loved that book. I love the cover of that book.
Yeah, I loved it so much.
And no dogs get hurt.
The author loves dogs so much, it's ridiculous. There might be a hurt dog. I can't remember. So I would highly recommend that. And we just were lucky enough to have this author visit us in Auburn, Janice Ray, and her classic, Ecology of a Cracker Childhood, deserves to be read over and over. It was the first book I reread when I retired, and it was so delightful to meet her. She came and she visited, and she also did a workshop, which some of us attended and got some good writing notes. There's 2 staff picks for me.
I was going to say a very practical lady, too. Very, very practical as far as her writing ability. She wasn't ethereal at all, just down to earth. I'm trying to think of, the minute you say, what books have you read? I'm thinking anything by Kirsten Hanna. I just really enjoy her. The last one I think I read was The Nightingale. Actually, right now I'm reading the short stories by Charles Rose.
Who wrote that introduction?
I think
Please
it was
tell the
Marion.
listening audience.
It was Marion Carcache, one of our, and John Williams, yes. But I'm enjoying reading his short stories only because I knew Charlie was a teacher of mine. He was a professor. Yes, well done, Marion, on the introduction.
I just read Furious Hours by Casey Sepp, and that was fantastic. And if you're from around here, or gives you the whole history of like Lake Martin, the history of life insurance. It's about Horseshoe Bend and all of it. So many details, but they're all so fascinating. She is a fantastic writer. And then I love anything by Margaret Atwood. She has just always been one of my favorite authors. Sometimes they're very dark, and sometimes they're really complex. But I always look forward.
Have
to
you read
her
the
writing.
latest?
What is it?
The Testaments?
No, I haven't.
No, haven't.
Oh, okay. I will have to read them.
Okay.
Do you have it?
We do.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Have you read it?
I'll buy
I
it
have
today.
not.
I'll buy it today.
But, that's a story that carries on after The Handmaid's Tale. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were. Yeah.
Asking about books that you'd recommend is like asking which child you'll recommend.
It's really, really hard. And as you pointed out, as you age, you have different books that you love. But Pat Conroy, who is of course ours, he's our Southern voice. But I remember reading The Prince of Tides by accident because it came in a Book of the Month club, and I hadn't ordered it. And the first introduction, the first few sentences, I was just there, just his descriptions, and it was as though I'd suddenly realized that there was somebody who understood the South in ways that I'm sure Faulkner did, and many others. But it was like the first time I found that voice that resonated with me, and that sense of feeling like that, as crazy as we all are, there's such beauty in that. So it's hard, and it's my favorite book of his. The others are great, but that was the book that just
Right. But the
nailed.
authenticity of his voice and the true Southern representation of it.
Yeah.
He was actually a wonderful supporter of ours at M. Judson. He came and did a big dinner for us before we opened. And so it was the year before he died. We had the opportunity
my
to sit with him and
gosh.
Cassandra. And I mean, just as good a human as you could ever meet, too, and would just tell the biggest stories with the biggest laugh. And there was, he did an event up at Furman, and like the signing line was, a quarter mile long, but he was going to sit and talk to every single person. And it just, couldn't think any more highly of him as an author, but also just as a great person.
That generosity of spirit that's there.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I would have to mention Donna Tartt's A Secret History.
Mhm.
I think that book is one that really drew me in and stayed with me forever after. And I'm a short story reader more than a novel reader in my later years, probably because I don't have a train of thought that will last throughout a novel. But I would certainly include the complete stories of Flannery O'Connor, the complete
Also,
stories
you
of
could die
Eudora
before you finish the novel.
Welty and O'Connor and some of William Faulkner's short stories. Of course, my favorite, the one I love, is Truman Capote. He's the stylist that I just love.
Gail, it's interesting that you say that because the book that is beside my bed right now is a book of essays called How We Die. So, and they're short.
I always had a rule reading a book. If I got to page 100 and it hadn't grabbed me, forget the book. Life isn't long enough to read a book you don't love, because there's so many out there you do.
Yes.
But now that I'm of a certain age, I've cut down to 75 pages, and I'm thinking about going to 50, quite frankly.
5's quick. I mean, you got to.
I spent 40 years teaching freshman composition and reading things I didn't want to read.
Yeah.
I give them 5 pages, and if I haven't levitated by the 5th page over the style,
You're out.
Imagery, I'm moving on.
Whew. Tough crowd.
So I think, yeah, it is, isn't it? But I think that just listening to the diversity of what we've all talked about, and what you've got in this store, the diversity of voices and genres, how do you go about figuring out what to carry?
It's a great question, because they say like over 100,000 books a year are published, right? When I first started it, they said 50, and I don't know if it's people are just starting to exaggerate more and more, but there's a lot of books, and I think that's really the purpose of an independent bookstore, isn't it? To really to curate in a way to help you to figure out what's the things that are really going to resonate with that audience, and I think it's very specific to place. We have found that what we find is wanted in this community is different from, Greenville, which is just up the road, right? So it's a process of getting good relationships with the publishers so that you know what's coming. It's having really good readers on staff who know what they love and what they recommend, and that they're also really good listeners so that they talk to people and learn what other people love. And then that develops into kind of the breadth of what we offer.
So I'm glad that you're talking about listening to people and having good readers. I was just reading the controversy around, I can't even remember the name of the book. That's
American
so
Dirt.
controversial. There you go, American Dirt. And not so interested in the controversy of whether or not she's a good author, but the controversy of how the publishing companies decide what becomes the bestseller. And I was very interested to hear or to read that when Oprah does her book pick, all the other books stop selling for a little while. And so in a way, it's kind of harmful to the whole book industry for these huge endorsements to come out because of what it does to the other books. And that really made me sad, That's
a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way. But if you look at what dominates the lists, it is a lot of those picks.
Right.
But before Oprah, there was Book of the Month Club. I mean, there's always been something.
There's always been
doing
something.
That.
I was just interested. I had not thought about how, I hear little bits just from knowing people who publish about how much control the publishers have over how, whether or not they push the books. And we know that people buy up books to make the bestseller list by, in the thousands or whatever it is, tens of thousands. And so seeing those things manipulated is kind of heartbreaking.
Well, and that's why the Mystics have always been shameless self-promoters. But
that's right. Has everybody bought our books?
But
you can find them on Amazon.
It was almost depressing to hear Janice Ray talk about how books got to the best-selling list, the New York Times best-selling list, and it was certain bookstores that they
have a lot of control.
And it had that control, and if you knew how to work the system like everything else, your book could get on the best-selling list without, I won't say without being worthy. Obviously, any book that the Mystics write would be worthy, but that some just get in there because they are They know how to do
I
that.
will say, in the defense of the New York Times, they have done an excellent job of really cracking down. So you're seeing a lot less that they no longer count like bulk book sales that aren't like that are sold in the 50s or hundreds, that aren't to an individual. And they check with every reporting. Both of our stores are reporting stores, and so they check with us to make sure that that what we're selling is actually to a person, not to an organization or not to a publicist or someone else who might be buying them and then distributing them. So they're doing, I think, their best to try to control that. But you do really see the influence of things like once that momentum gets started, and a lot of it is the ones that get on the Reese's picks or the Oprah picks or the Jenna Bush picks. Those have so much media energy behind them, and then once that momentum gets going, I think y'all went to see Delia Owens, right? And
we
so,
did.
That book has been on the top 10 for
and we're thrilled
forever. So but it's got so much inertia and momentum behind it, it's hard to stop once it kind of gets going.
Well, I have to give a send up to the New York Times too, because I was lucky enough to go to the Edinburgh Book Festival last summer, and they brought just lots of authors that you could go and hear, and they were signing their books, and the New York Times really sponsored it.
Yeah.
So it was really fantastic.
I think they intend to do very good things. And they're something that's about to be a big game changer in our industry is that a new way to purchase books is being introduced as sort of a counterbalance. They hope to take a little bit of Amazon. They won't take all of Amazon, but it is now a site, it's called bookshop.org, that's been developed that is to try to support independent bookstores. The model is to support independent bookstores. It's not a for-profit kind of organization. But the New York Times was the first one to adopt Bookshop over Amazon. So anytime you see a book for sale, they're going to push that over to the Bookshop rather than Amazon, which I think is a pretty exciting change.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, like living in Auburn, and when I want a book now, if I don't go to the library and see if it's there, I'll come in here and order it and let you guys get it for me
makes a
instead of
difference.
just going to Amazon,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to go to Amazon, but
It is.
and I have to say I am a Prime member, but I'd rather buy the books from you.
Well, we appreciate that. I mean, because it really does make a difference to local communities. But we also have to be able to compete on convenience, and making it easy to do, which I think is exciting about the bookshop model, because it is saying we understand there is a need for that convenience in this world that we live in. How do we do that and still support our local communities?
I think it's very hard to run a business off of one product, like a book. And I noticed that you have some beautiful things in here, in particular that wrapping paper over there. But what else do you offer in here besides books?
The diversity is critical to the model, right? To be able to do this. We actually have more books in the Auburn store than we have in the Greenville store. In Greenville, the mix is a little bit closer, but this community has a strong demand for books, which I think is awesome. But in addition to books, we do really unique gifts. They are as well curated as our books are. We spend a lot of time finding regional providers, especially. So like if you see like our dish towels or our body lotions, those are out of Charleston. And we're constantly looking for ways that we can source down to our coffee beans. We use Mama Mocha does the roasting of our beans. And so we try to find just kind of great things that are as regional as they can be that complement the book offering in the same sort of, intentional and curated way.
Oh, well, that's obvious. It's intentional because it's gorgeous. Speaking of Mama Mocha's, that's the other place we did off-site, out of studio.
Yeah.
And it was our very, very interesting first look at being
our
away,
remote.
being away from the studio.
It's a little bit rowdier there, too, than here, I think. Yeah. In a great way. Yeah.
Well, also, the thing that struck me was there were a lot of young college students. And so Mary, who's our youngest, and that's kind of sad that she's our youngest.
Because I'm 55.
How old are you, Mary?
55.
Okay, so this
I like the way you say that.
This 55-year-old woman goes around to all these students and says we're about to do a podcast on the paranormal. And anybody who wants to join in. Well, they looked like deers in the headlights. And furthermore, they're thinking, what are those old ladies doing? I mean, podcasts are not for the elderly. And so when they would go get their coffee, I promise you, they would make such a wide arc around our table as if we could actually zap them with elderliness. It was,
It's contagious, after all.
yeah. Boy, I promise you, they will catch it. If they're lucky. So we feel like we're in a friendlier climate here. Although I will say Mama Mocha is a very friendly person, a dear person, but we needed
She's
her there.
fantastic.
We needed her there to help us with the language gap. And so it was amusing to see how we were received.
So I'm just waving at a friend across your bookstore. This is a community.
It
And
is.
so the importance of this to community, to building community and sustaining it, and even the writers that you bring in. So talk to us a little bit about how you build community in a bookstore and why it's important.
I feel like that's the word I say the most. Like, I don't want it to lose its power, but I feel like that's the most important thing that we do, and that we nurture the writing community, that we nurture the reading community, and that this community is amazing in the way that it has opened its arms to us, and not just the customer base, but also the other businesses. I mean, it's just a really great town. Like, what do y'all love about Auburn?
Well, despite the high rises everywhere, it is still a small town. And like I said, you cannot, I know those that grew up here don't think so, but Spartanburg was a much bigger town than this one. Like I said, my world is about as big as a marble. And especially in Auburn, I see people that I know all the time. You have that, and again, we're going to use that word, community. You know, you know people. You're not just another person walking down the street. Somebody's going to say, "Hey."
Yeah, and even though I'm from Atlanta and all my family was from Atlanta, we all went to Auburn. And my grandfather went to Auburn, my dad, I went to Auburn, my brother, all my children went to Auburn.
Wow.
So we're Auburn people, and a lot of people from Atlanta go to Auburn. And my husband's from Nashville, Tennessee, and a lot of people from Nashville go to Auburn as well. So it really is home for us. So I love Auburn.
Not all of us grew up here, but I grew up here. And my dad still lives here and has a place out on Wire Road past the vet school and da-da-da-da. So for us, this really is home. But it really is always amazing to me how people come here and find home from far-flung places, including across the ocean. And, it's just like a friend of mine used to call it Lotus Land, because once you get here, you're sort of sucked into
That's a perfect description of
Lotus
it.
Land.
And I kind of feel that way. Like 6 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, sure, whatever. But like now, I love it. And everybody keeps saying, so you're moving to Auburn? I'm like, well, yeah, I might be. I love it here. And it's the welcoming way that it feels. And I've been talking to a lot of our booksellers one-on-one this week, sort of seeing where we are after our 4 months and what do we need to do better and that kind of thing. And everybody just keeps saying, like, they love the spirit of this community. They love each other. They love the fact that we now have all these regulars who come in sometimes more than once a day,
Wow.
Like, it's got this town has such a personal feel to it. I think that's a really cool place to have a business.
Well, my son is a fourth generation Auburn graduate, and actually he's fifth, but the first one I think was at the Methodist College, so can I count it? I don't know. Sure. But
sure.
Can I count it? And I was born in the Auburn Infirmary and lived to tell it. And this was after the war, and
Which war?
Which war, yeah.
yeah,
The Great
the First World War, the First World War. No,
1812. No.
and because everyone was poor, the babies in the infirmary were put in the Chester drawers, and I think they closed the door on mine, every day. All the Auburnites, and believe me, if you weren't born in Auburn, you're not an Auburnite. But I have a person in my class that was talking about being from Auburn, and we all said, you came here in 4th grade. You're not from Auburn.
And there is some of that. I first landed in Opelika when we came down this way. But there is still an acceptance. There's still a people bring you in, even though you may not be a native.
Well, yeah, we tolerate you, yes.
Yes, you do. Very well. Thank you very much. One of the things, June, again, my ADD moment, I'm looking around, and there are little notes in front of a lot of books. What are those?
There are. Those are review cards.
Cool.
And that's kind of what we do. Like, that's what I think we're best at, is everybody here, we got a lot of readers, but telling people what we love about the books, is it helps people to find their next favorite book,
And those who have not been in here yet need to come and see this, because they are handwritten notes, little love notes.
They
Yes,
are little
ab-
love notes to the
about-
books.
About
Mhm.
the books. That's a great idea. That's wonderful, because how much Gail may sit here and read the first 50 pages, but I'm not going to do that. So that's a great
75. She's still at 75.
That's wonderful.
We need one employee who can put a "Does the dog die?"
Yeah, that's
Like
pretty
that.
important to my
That's-
husband
that's
too. Like,
very important.
have you read the Dog Stars?
I don't read anything with
Dog in it.
but until somebody has told
Mhm.
me that
Yeah.
it'll be okay.
Mike Armour feels the same way. Yeah, Joseph Heller. It's a great, one of my favorite books ever. But he was like, "Does the dog die?"
See, I can't read any more of Donna Tartt's books because they're animal problems and everything after The
Mhm.
Secret History. I had no problem with the murder in The Secret History.
So people dying is fine.
Fine.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
just don't hurt the dog.
A child does. That's all right.
Right. Just not the dog, please.
Please, not the dog.
I hear you.
I was listening to you say, Joanne said maybe she could just read the note cards and Gail would read some. But last night I was browsing on my phone and ran into something that said things that bookstore owners hate when you do it in bookstores. And one of them was read the whole book. I was like, man, who would do that?
I don't hate that.
But one of them was something called showrooming. And it said,
Mm.
oh, people know when you're showrooming because you're walking around taking pictures of the books to order them later on Amazon. And then I felt really bad, so I'm going to have to get a little card that says I'm not showrooming. I'm taking books of pictures. Wait, swap that. Pictures of books all the time just to remind me to put them on my list of books to read or come back when I have more
I
money.
do that
Right.
too.
I think the last time I was in here, I probably spent about $80, so I had to take a lot of pictures. So y'all forgive those of us that showroom.
I mean, people feel differently about it. I feel like I care that people read. I care that you come in, that you're part of a community where you choose to buy your books. I'd love for you to buy them here. It makes a difference for your community if you buy them here. But if that's not what you do, I'm not going to judge. I mean,
I'd much rather buy them here.
yeah.
Another thing I read that bookstore owners don't like when you do is steal books, which
Now that is true. That is true.
which led me to Google what is the most stolen book, and
What was it?
the Holy Bible, honey.
In the 60s, the most stolen book was Please Steal This Book by Abby Hoffman. And bookstores literally quit carrying it because it was called Please Steal This Book by Abby Hoffman. Not that I would know because I was not a hippie like some people here.
That's number 2 on the most stolen book. And then but the Harry Potter books are stolen a lot.
Really?
Yeah, and that's sort of surprising because they're kind of big and hefty.
They'd be hard to hide.
Maybe they think they have a cloak of invisibility. But I was very tickled. What somebody explained that said, well, maybe since the people just leave Bibles lying all around, that people think they're just free for the taking.
That's funny.
Aren't those Gideon Bibles free?
Yes, they are.
I always take them.
Yes, I've noticed your extensive Gideon Bible collection.
Did you know that the Salvation Army can't sell Bibles?
Why not?
They will not sell the Word of God.
Well, that's very Christian of them.
I thought so too.
I hardly know what to say about that.
For once, there's a moment of
I wanted to put
speechlessness.
my 2
among-
Yeah,
cents worth
I
in.
noticed that every mystic paused at that.
I don't think. I think if we went all the way back to Jesus in the temple, throwing the money changers out, that he probably wouldn't want to see people churning big profits on it, right? I mean, come on, Joanne, you're our religious expert.
In fact, we just read about Jesus up changing the money changers. I think if you really, really, really want a Bible, I'll buy you one. Hey.
So it does seem like, June, that there has been a resurgence of interest in independent bookstores. That there was such a tough time when big box stores took over, but they seem to be coming back. Do you
I
feel
think
that
that's-
way? Or
Oh yeah, that does seem to be the case. I mean, you saw sort of that huge spike when you had the Books A Millions and the Barnes and Nobles and everybody kind of. But that was not just books, right? You were seeing huge big box stores taking over communities for all different industries.
Groceries.
For groceries, for
Yes.
like the Best Buys and that kind of thing. And then also in our industry, you had ebooks. The Kindles were really, really popular there for a short while, and the Nooks. But I think what you're seeing is a return to community. It's more of the turn back toward the local and the appreciation for what the local businesses bring. So I don't think it's just books, but you are definitely. I mean, the independent bookstore industry has really done, knock wood, really well for the past few years, and I hope that's not going to slow down. But I think it is part of a bigger conversation.
It's funny that you should mention Kindle because I found my Kindle. Jimmy, my husband, got me a Kindle many years ago in hopes that I would not buy one more book because I always have bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves of books, and I become very attached to them. I just, like children, I just want them around me. And I found my Kindle. I haven't used it in probably 10 years.
Right?
Because I've been reading books, real books,
real
and turning
books.
pages.
And it turns out, people come in and talk about that all the time. Like, they like the weight of a book and the smell of a book and knowing how far along you are in the book, which is harder to do in a Kindle.
Well, when we were talking,
or dog ear the pages.
when we were talking about the resurgence of bookstores, I noticed that whenever I list where I want to see in a town, I always have a bookstore there. So I started thinking about what is my
mystical ability.
Yes, right. I just knew it would be there. But my favorite bookstore to visit when I'm not in Auburn is called the Last Bookstore in Los Angeles, and it's in downtown Los Angeles, and they have the wonderful opportunity to have a huge space.
Don't they have a lot of book art?
They do.
Yeah, I've seen
That's what
some fantastic pictures out of there.
Yeah, and the second floor is all picture op. The first time I went there, I didn't buy a book because I was so overwhelmed I did not know what to do. So in a way, they're killing their first timers buying books. But on the second floor, they have taken, now there are, and I know nobody's going to agree with this, but truthfully, totally useless books that nobody's going to read anymore. There are things like...
You can always use them as a doorstop.
Well, that's what they've done. They have built things out of them. And I noticed your cash register...
Book wall.
Book wall. Yeah, the great wall of books. But they have used theirs for making arches that you can walk through and portholes. My top favorite is this bookcase that seems to be falling apart, and all the books are flying off the shelf. And they're hung by, I guess, that monofilament, so you can't really see. So it looks like this bookshelf is just really totally...
exploding.
So you can walk through the second floor and take about 1 million pictures. So I started looking through the notes of where I travel, and I actually have a list of bookstores I want to... a bucket list of bookstores, and I was going to mention them to you. This is sad. 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, I went to Portland, but by the time I got there, I was so tired, I just went to the bar across the street from the Airbnb, and I never made it to Powell's Bookstore, which is a really famous bookstore. That's on my bucket list. Another one is Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi. Faulkner House Books in New Orleans. I can't believe I haven't been there. I lived in New Orleans. And, of course, if I get back to Paris, I'm going to the Shakespeare and Company.
All good choices.
Have you been to
Speaking
all of
of
those?
No.
Yeah, in New Orleans, that was one of my favorite bookstores. It was, and I don't know what the name of it is, but I can remember Jimmy and I walking the streets of New Orleans and seeing a bookstore and ducking in, and it reminded me of the bookstore in The Never-Ending Story.
Well, it's Faulkner House.
Maybe it was Faulkner House.
It's an old place.
dark.
It's where he used to live, actually.
Really? This
On
was just,
Pirates
and
Alley.
it could have been because I felt the vibes. I mean, it was just, I never wanted to leave that place. It was great. Great.
There was a it still exists, but it's not the same. There was a great writing conference called Words and Music, and so the couple, Rosemary and Joe, who owned most recent owners of Faulkner House, did this amazing writers conference, and it would be people that big names would come in as well as just up and coming writers. But that bookstore, they would have the reception for the authors there, and you could sneak in sometimes, and they lived above it. And so it all smelled like old books in New Orleans, it was just
Atmosphere,
amazing. So that it just recently changed hands, but it's going to keep going. So that's wonderful.
The smell. I was asking my family who was with me last night about their favorite bookstores, and my daughter Anna had just been to L.A. and been to the Last Bookstore, and so I was listening to her talk about it as you were, Gail, and then I did a little reading, and I found this fabulous quote, or the hope was to try to convert Instagram visitors into book purchasers. So the whole visual appeal of it is
That is so so funny because I wrote down the same quote.
Oh, good. And also that they did not organize their fiction section because they want you to look and, go through and pick around and search and discover. So that could drive some people quite mad. I thought it was an interesting ploy.
Well, I've been to Shakespeare and Company in Paris, and it's fantastic. It's always packed, though. I mean, it's really packed, and it's right across from Notre Dame. So, it's in a great area of Paris to see. And also Powell's books are in Oregon.
Have you been there?
Yeah, my
Because it's
daughter.
a whole square.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a whole block, right?
Yeah, my daughter used to live in Portland, so
Yeah.
I've been there many times, and you can't take it in a day. So, and it's fascinating. And I was trying to think. I went in a great bookstore in Park City, Utah. My husband and I were at Sundance a year ago,
Yeah.
and it was great. I mean, really wonderful books. A lot of local things about theater or about movies, but then, it had an incredible gift section, too. I can't remember the name of it, though, but it was really fantastic.
Have to look into that one.
Well, I mean, there's
Yeah.
Park City isn't that big, so you could find it,
I'm wondering about a mystic moment right now.
Ding, 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 ding.
Does anybody have one?
Or I do. I was reading a book today. And I was really relating to this character. I know. I was really relating to this character. And one of the character's traits was that she writes everything down. She's constantly, like at the end of every day, she writes down who she talked to and, all the way down to what they wore. And I kind of do that too. I'm obsessed. And lo and behold, this character, come to find out, in one of her notebooks had some notes about Edisto Island. And anybody that knows me knows that's my soul place. And so
Mary,
it was
that's
quite a
you.
mystic moment to discover that she had been writing about Edisto Island in her notebook just as I was feeling so deeply connected to this character.
That's
So there's
kinda
my
like-
mystic moment.
That's kind of like the never-ending story where you became part of the book.
I guess so. This is a really elderly woman, and she's, in a assisted living, and so I've got some ways to go before I become her. It was quite mystical.
Not that far.
Humph! I'm the youngest. I'm a wee 55.
Well, my son was in Fairhope this past weekend, and he sent me a phone photo. He was at a Mardi Gras parade for dogs, and the name of the parade was the Mystic Mutts.
Wow.
That's
So
quite
I thought
wonderful.
I would pass that on to y'all.
I like that.
So I know you're doing some programming, so to speak, and you're having authors come in and readings and stuff. Tell us a little bit about that and
Sure.
and how that works.
And we're open
for
to
you.
suggestions, so y'all can help us come up with ideas. But so the first 3 months were really just dedicated to treading water, right? Like we were so focused on getting open before the home games because I was terrified of what was going to happen with the home games. And then we had the holidays all kind of like loaded up, right? So we didn't have a lot of time to think about the programming and what we were going to launch into. We were trying to not do too much too fast. So we've got a couple of great things, like we were talking about the Alabama Noir panel that is coming up here in another month or so. We're doing a lot more of the author events, and so we'll be building that program, but also we're going to do some specialty kinds of events that we've done in the Greenville store. Things like we have a great wine and book pairing event. We call it page pairings, where we match a book to a wine, and it's a ticketed event, and you come and you get to taste all the wines, and then you leave with whatever book you want.
The mystics are in.
Y'all are in, right? Yeah.
It sounds like a mystic
It's
meeting.
hard to beat, really. It is hard to beat. We love doing that. We have a great series called Lunch and Lit, where we do have a lunch, and it's a ticketed event, and you get a copy of the book, and the author comes and talks. And so these are the kinds of things we really want to get more involved in. We're hosting a lot of events here, like the Southern Humanities Review is coming this spring. And so, there's just more friends. We're looking to get much more involved in the community events side of things and bringing more authors into the space and more people to really appreciate that opportunity to be with an author.
Well, I'm again intrigued in my ADD moment. So you also have blind dates.
We do.
Did you explain that?
Sure. That's actually, almost every bookstore in the country now is doing a blind date section. The origin story is that it started somewhere in Australia, I think. What a fantastic idea to take a book that's kind of been underappreciated and talk about why it's a great book. I mean, everything in that section is a fantastic book that people just didn't pick up for. They judged it by its cover, or it just didn't have the appeal. And so we take it and we put a few blurbs on there as to why we thought it was a great book, and people love it. I mean,
do I see a candle with Glenda the Good Witch?
you do.
Oh,
Yeah.
my word.
Yeah, there's also T Swift and Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz over there too. So
I never knew that they had their own candle. These are the type of candles, usually with Jesus or Mary on them, that my mother lights when we
the
have
saint
tornadoes.
candles, but
Marion-
then
there's
Our
our
own
candles.
Marion has a lifetime supply of these candles.
There was going to be a series of mystic candles, but it didn't come to pass.
I have several of those. I just call them Catholic candles, but I also have a voodoo candle, a do not arrest candle that I light on special occasions.
Do you have the 7 Powers of Africa?
No.
Do you have St. John the Conqueror?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I have a lot of Marys.
I have Billy Bob the Southerner.
I was wondering why you hadn't called me lately, Mary. That candle is working.
I'm actually supposed to have 3, but I'm getting by with 1. What's next? I mean, aside from all the programming and stuff, is there anything else on the horizon?
I think, now we're figuring out how to grow in the community. That's where we're headed next. As we feel like we've gotten our feet under us, we kind of know what we're doing now. And it's the chance to do things like this, the chance to meet more people in the community and learn what y'all are doing and how we can work together to, grow the literary community in Auburn.
And what is it about books and coffee? Because you have some
Y'all
very
tell me,
fine
what is
coffee.
it? Yeah. There's something about books and coffee, books and tea that just go together, right? Well, we have it's Mama Mocha's beans. They're from, fantastic coffee. But
I was going to say, I think it's just the sensory overload, because when I went in, I guess it was Faulkner House, it was just the smell of the books. I mean, that took me in immediately, and then just looking at all of them, and it was like books went on forever. And I think, you come in and you smell the coffee and you just want to sit down and start reading.
it's just cozy.
Yeah.
And we are getting ready to add wine, which books and wine go well together too. Yeah.
You'll be happy to know that we all have our own wine glasses with our names on them, and they have lids. So we won't mess up our
That's
books.
an important
We've
feature,
been known
yeah.
to spill some red wine.
Why?
On some
Why
white
do they
tablecloths.
have?
I feel you.
Oh, why do they have lids? Let's hear from Margie on that one.
Okay, they're sippy cups, if you want to know the truth. And the reason is because I always spill something. My coffee's on the floor. Okay, I will spill it on the floor, and I won't spill it on the table. So
That's only because someone won't allow you to put coffee on the table.
Well, that's true. The queen, she hands me the sippy cup.
And says to keep it away from the electronics.
Yeah,
so.
she allows me to drink at all.
One time when we had I think it was our first book we had published, and Gail was out of town, and I'm not exactly sure how this all went, but some of us sneakier mystics were for some reason at a bar, and we put copies of our brand new book up on the bar surrounded by beer and took pictures and said, "Ooh, Gail would be so mad if she saw
We
this."
said we were going to send them to Gail and watch how quick it took her to get back home.
But I don't think we ever had the nerve
We
to send
had
them
done
to her.
a signing at a gift shop around the corner, and then we walked over
Okay,
to the Hound
Hound.
afterwards, and we had all the books up
Oh.
on the bar, and we were going to see how long it took Gail to get back to Auburn.
The beer kind of almost spilled itself.
It
but
really
it
did.
It almost spilled itself.
And then we
I don't know what
hurried up and
happened.
Got him off the bar.
I've always encouraged you girls to do drugs rather than liquid, because it doesn't. If you spill a
cleaner.
drug, it does not ruin the book. And
Unless you're burning the drug.
yeah, we tend to give away the
risky.
books we've spilled on, or if we sign them incorrectly, like to Helen, and she goes, "No, my name is Ellen." But at the next reading, we go, "Is there a Helen out there? We have a book for you."
So I did see that there is a book by someone named Jen Campbell called "Weird Things People Say in Bookstores."
Yeah, it's a great book.
And the
It's
only
fun.
one I jotted down was somebody asking for a kid's book, Lionel Richie in the Wardrobe.
That's awesome.
I was really tickled.
We could
by the
probably write
quotes.
a book at this
I
point.
was just going to say you
Yeah.
should probably start collecting. So
Mhm.
do you have that book here?
We don't have it here. We've had it before. I
Oh,
know.
okay.
We need to get that back in.
Okay.
And we should start our own collection of things that we hear. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
We get a
yeah.
lot of people who want to check the books out, which is always kind of odd to me.
Check them out.
Mhm.
Like
Like a library.
We will be glad to check them out for $25.99.
And you don't even have to bring it back.
So speaking of that, if people wanted to check you out, you can be found in downtown Auburn. But
In
how,
downtown Auburn?
how else can people?
The usual ways in the interwebs. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram. We have a great Instagram feed. It's Auburn Oil Booksellers. Same thing for Facebook. And we've got a great website too, auburnoilbooksellers.com.
And they are right across the street from 1716. So
Yep,
if
and right
you're-
next to Taco Mama.
and Taco
And the
Mama.
donut
Mhm.
place.
And the
Isn't there a
perfect.
donut
Oh,
place
yeah.
right next door?
Mhm.
Or one way?
Yep.
Yep, there's
University
a lot
donut,
of
yep.
love
Yeah.
here.
And
so-
beautiful St. Dunstan's is across the street.
However, the pastries here are pretty darn wonderful. So
They're
you don't have
fantastic,
to go anywhere
right?
else. Not that I would
Yeah.
know.
There's your pastry.
Ever.
In Greenville, we sublease to the Chocolate Mousse Bakery, and we've been trying to find something local. So if y'all have any recommendations, we'd love to hear them. But
nice.
we bring things down from the chocolate mousse they make for us.
I think we're about to run out of time here. So I guess we should mention the Mystic books. Does anybody know where we can find Mystic books?
in the trunk of Joanne's car.
That's
If you're not local, and well, there's some local places.
There will be. Actually, this is kind of sad, but it's kind of mystic. The place where we have our book flooded.
oh no.
Well, of course, if you've been in Alabama for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's flooding everywhere. I actually removed our books because we're going to have to give away several of the flooded books. We had to pour a little wine on it, put a story
Yeah.
behind it. But
We meant to do that.
but when we're back in operation, you can find us at Heritage Gift and Gourmet and University Bookstore. What I want to say,
I know another bookstore you might want to let know as soon as you've got your book. Yeah, books read.
we'd be happy to bring you as many
Yeah.
as you can help. Yes, this is a perfect place for the Mystic books. It's friendly. But what I wanted to say besides that is we're available for your pool parties.
That's
right?
true.
Your bar
Mhm.
mitzvahs, your garden clubs. We'll speak to anyone.
The dog shows, whatever,
Yeah.
we can
I will
come speak.
I will
wine
quit
parties.
trying to levitate the audience because obviously that doesn't work, and it was an unfortunate incident at the Rotary Club. Where else do we go? Well, we speak to any library that'll have us.
We don't like to talk much, but we can be
Right.
We can be
right.
convinced
But
to
I
do
don't
so.
know. Other than that, where can we be found online?
We have a typical social media presence. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. We do have a web page, but I can never remember the address. So if you just go to Facebook, we're the Mystic Order of East Alabama, and you can find our web page there, which has all the links to the books on Amazon and other links to our other social media.
And if we
pages.
can mention, we also have a podcast that you can find on your podcast station, Spotify or YouTube, or did it load up on YouTube yet?
Stitcher, yep, or iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts.
And we are the Mystics with an S pod, and the Mystics podcast. And if we do say so ourselves, it's wonderful.
And if you don't like to use social media, you can email us at themysticspod@gmail.com.
Well, this has been wonderful, Jean. Thank you for letting
It's
us
been
be
so much
here.
fun. Thank you so
And
much. I'm
let us
delighted to meet
ramble
you
on
all
the
and
way we
appreciate you
have.
being here. And yeah.
And remember, be the flame.
Not the moth.